So I was talking with my buddy Craig the other day, and we were kind of just messaging back and forth. And he's one of those guys I talk to very often. And he brought up a very interesting point. And now you got to realize I already knew what he was referring to, but he brought it up to the point where it was much more of an extensive state, right? And he brought up the idea of the rent strike. And apparently, over the last couple of weeks, this word rent strike has been, skyrocketing in terms of Google searches. So I messaged Sam, I give Sam a call, and this is around like 11:30 p.m. at night. And I'm like, hey man, are you okay to talk? Are you decent? And he goes, yeah, of course. And I ask him, because he's more the marketer between the two of us, right? Between him and I, he does the marketing, I do more of the investment, and he is very more aware of all these Google and YouTube algorithms and things like that. So I said, is this true? Is this true that the term rent strike has spiked over the last couple of weeks? Right? And sure enough, he checks the data and it says yes. All right. So I thought I'd make a little video talking about rent strikes. What does this mean for tenants and landlords? What's the best idea moving forward? And overall, just offer a 30,000 foot view, because a lot of you guys don't know this, but not only am I a landlord, I'm a renter. Now, granted, that rent check may be a little bit bigger than the average person in terms of how much I pay for rent. But my wife and I, we choose to rent. We actually ended up moving from a 4-bedroom house to an apartment complex, a three-unit apartment unit. And, I personally prefer renting. But this is coming from a place, I offer that to you because I'm saying that I am not only a landlord, but I am also a renter as well. Right? And I get it. We live in a society where, we live in a tip of the iceberg type of social culture where only the highest of the highs and the lowest of lows get shared on social media. You scroll down on Facebook, you see the absolute, worst tenant or the absolute worst landlord, or, negativity spread. So I think we can all agree that these are the type of things that's being shared on social media, particularly pages like Facebook. Well, there are good tenants, there are bad tenants. There are good landlords, bad landlords. Guys, I've had both, right? So let me offer this to you, right? And Sam made a phenomenal point on the rent strike and some tax laws that can come of it. And he offered a phenomenal point. And matter of fact, he made a video just yesterday in the time of this recording, that if people go on rent strike, then what's going to happen is you're going to eliminate these small private landlords, the Mr. and Mrs. Jones, who are more than willing to have a conversation with you, and they're going to be replaced by the McDonald's, right? The big boys who will absolutely, and I guarantee you, because I've gone toe to toe with these guys, that they will not care what your excuse or what your reasoning. Your mom could have been in the hospital, you could have medical. They will not care. If you have your Mr. and Mrs. Jones that are your landlords and they're collecting rent from you, sure. There may be times where they may be a little strict or a little, hard on you for something. I don't know. But I guarantee you that situation is going to be a lot better for you as a renter compared to somebody who is a big corporation. Their job is literally every single day talk to people like you and just not care, not have a care in the world. And their number one thing is just to collect that check from you every single month, regardless of what happens. Or they're going to issue something in which you will be kicked out. You will be evicted. A sheriff will show up and you will have to leave the premises. So he made a good point. So please go watch that video. It's an opportunity for me to brag on my brother a little bit. But let me offer you the big picture. Let me offer you the 30,000 foot view, because I think now is the time where the experts need to step up and speak. And in my opinion, I think now is the time where only the experts should be allowed to speak and be heard. I don't want to hear an individual who has a degree in women's studies, who's 29 years old, who's never owned an investment property, give me advice on how landlord-tenant law should be working, right? No disrespect to the people who have degrees in women's studies, but that's just not the way it's going to be done. If I have a medical issue, I'm not going to go to the kindergartner teacher. I'm going to go to the surgeon. I'm going to go to the individual who has expertise in the medical field. So let me offer you the big picture, right? Let me offer you this. So let me speak to the landlords first. I have something to say for the landlords and for the renters. But let me start with the renters first. Let me offer you the big picture. Let me share with you what's most likely going to happen. So number one, let's say you do go through with this rent strike. And I understand that the courts are closed right now, and unless an individual or landlord has government financing, they're not able to file. But as far as I'm concerned, if you bought it through owner financing or you bought it through a bank, you haven't bought it through Fannie Mae or any other government type of financing, you're still able to file for an eviction. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is the case. The fact of the matter is, once this all blows over, whether it be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or for the rest of the year, you're most likely going to be filed an eviction. You're going to be served an eviction notice. You're going to get out. Now, let me share with you what happens. That eviction goes on what's called as your credit report. And that's going to make it extremely harder for you to rent anywhere else. And not only that, but you're damaging your credit. So yeah, sure, you skip out on the rent, but I would argue that's the exact reason why sometimes the poor stay poor and the rich stay rich, because a lot of times, based on my observation and my experience, a lot of the individuals who struggle financially are the ones who do not know how to delay the short-term gratification. So congratulations, short-term, it will work for you. If you decide not to pay rent, you go on this so-called rent strike, and you don't pay rent for 1 month, 2 months, 3, or however long this lasts, congratulations. You got 2-3 months of free rent, but it's going to damage you for a very, very long time. A very long time. It's going to make it very hard for you to rent anywhere else. It's going to be very hard for you to get a car, for you to buy a home. I mean, you're really putting yourself in a situation that is not good long term, right? So that's something at least for you to think about, right? If you're going to make that decision on whether or not you're going to go on this rent strike, and again, guys, Sam and I both, we rent. There you go. Surprise, right? Your landlords who own 80-something units, we also rent. So at least have that information. And here's another thing, right? Here's another thing that I want to offer you, a piece of information. Let's say you do go on this rent strike and the mortgage doesn't get paid, right? Can we both agree that right now there is nothing at the time of this recording, right? It's May 1st of the time of me recording this, that there is nothing set in stone. There's nothing concrete that is allowing landlords and small business, whoever, to so-called skip out on the mortgage. Right? If anything, they're talking about furloughing, which doesn't help, because at the end of the day, after the 2-3 months, you're going to have to pay that in full. And can we both agree that most landlords do not have that type of capital reserve? Most landlords are not driving around in Lamborghinis and Ferraris. There are people who literally just live, oftentimes, right next door. There are individuals who have the same financial situation that you do. They still go to work. They still go to 9-to-5 jobs. Matter of fact, based on my experience of traveling the country and teaching aspiring real estate investors, 90% of people who are landlords still have a 9-to-5. They still have a job. So really, I don't know who you think the enemy is, but there is no enemy, right? So we're on the same page, right? So can we at least agree that there's nothing in concrete that's allowing landlords to skip out on their mortgage, just like how there's nothing concrete on renters allowing you to skip out on the rent. So what happens? Typically, landlords pay their mortgage. The way the banking systems work is that these mortgages get packaged. They get packaged into what's known as security bonds, right? Bonds or securities, whatever you want to call it, but they get packaged together into securities. And these securities get traded, right? They're investable vehicles in which pension funds, a lot of pension funds invest their funds and their money, their capital into these packaged securities, these packaged bonds. Well, guess who invests into these pension funds? Guess whose money are in these pension funds? It's the teachers, the essential workers, the nurses. So you gotta excuse me, that this is the exact reason why I scroll down on Facebook, wherever, maybe I'm, in my office, just distracting myself for 5 minutes before I get back to work. But it scratches my head. This is the exact reason why I'm scrolling down Facebook. I'm scratching my head because, you got the same person who's going, yeah, rent strike 2020. And then I scroll down on their page and they're posting stuff on, we need to thank the essential workers. We need to applaud. These are our heroes. Guys, these are totally contradicting actions. By you protesting and pushing for a rent strike, you are directly hurting the essential worker. You're directly hurting the teacher. You're hurting the nurse, because guess where their hard-earned money, their life savings, guess where it's at? It's in these pension funds that's anchored by the mortgages in which your landlord pays, which comes from you. So for a lot of people who don't understand the economics, and guys, I understand. We make our opinions, we make our facts based on what we know, right? But as an individual who's a landlord, an expert in the landlord, the tenants, right? In the real estate investing space, I offer you this as things to chew on, as things for you to think on before you make that post on Facebook, before you start screaming from the rooftops why this would be this and why this should be that and whatnot. And guys, again, I rephrase, 90% of people who own rental properties are small business owners. You're talking about employees, and I think the last time I checked, 60 million Americans are employed by small businesses. So not only do you have, the issues with the pension funds and the essential workers and their lifelong savings, but you also have issues with small businesses. You also have issues with the banking system, and they're already in a liquidity crisis, which means the banks don't have enough actual physical cash in their vault, which affects everything, by the way. That affects your ability, your credit, your ability to get a house, to refinance, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter, right? It affects everything. It affects the grocery stores that you shop in. Everything in the economy is attached, right? It's a circle of life, right? As they say in The Lion King. So let me now talk to the landlords. Right? I've got a lot of landlords that I'm seeing right now. They're putting out letters, they're putting out things and they're trying to instill fear into the heart of their renters. Right? And for me, guys, if you're a renter and you're a good renter, you pay on time, you take care of the property, and you have a horrible landlord. Let me say this, I apologize on behalf of all the landlords. Right? I apologize because there are landlords who are just scums of the earth. Right? That is true. Right, it's not as much as you think, right? I would say it's probably about 5 to 10% of people that are genuinely slumlords. They do not care. They're not in the people business. They just care about the money, right? Let me assure you that I, along with most and a high majority of landlords, are not like that. And I'm full disclosure. I do own a course on teaching people how to be good landlords, how to be better landlords. We're in a people business. We have to treat people like human beings. I understand. But let me speak to the landlords. For those of you guys that are putting out letters, trying to instill fear into these renters, that's not a long-term strategy, right? I've said it before. One of the aspects of being poor is that you don't delay the short-term gratification. Well, guess what? I've always been told that poor is a mentality. And if you're a landlord, you can still be poor. You can still have a lot of money in your bank account, still be poor, right? So for a lot of you guys that are landlords and you're putting out these letters, you're forcing the renters to pay rent and you're not being sensitive to the situation. You're not at least willing to communicate. You too are setting yourself up for failure. So again, guys, these things to think about. Here are my overall thoughts. Here are my overall thoughts on what's going on. We have to remember that this is nobody's fault, right? The whole virus, the pandemic, right? Everything that's happening economically, it's not the landlord's fault, it's not the tenant's fault, right? There is no reason to point the finger at each other, right? If anything, it should be the opposite. This is an opportunity where we have to build a bridge. And I highly encourage you to go on Spotify, go on iTunes, and listen to the First Deal Experience hosted by yours truly with my guest, Michael Conrad. Michael Conrad, real estate attorney and a landlord for 25 years, breaks down the best interest for the tenants, for everyone, right? And he details the whole 30,000-foot view picture. I highly encourage you checking that out. Right? We got to have communication. We got to be building bridges around these times. And what I highly encourage if anything, if we have to push something, if we have to put the finger somewhere and we have to scream and yell out something, rah, 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 if we have to do something, right, let's at least push for mortgages to be paid on the back end. I don't like the whole idea of furloughing because, again, most landlords do not have the financial capability to pay 3 months worth of mortgages all at once. That's a lot. And even for a guy like me, I've got 80 something units, right? I sold off half my portfolio in 2019 because it was a high market. But at the end of the day, I have a lot of units. The mortgage payment is not cheap, guys. It is not cheap, right? Coming from being vulnerable here, being fully transparent, right? It is a very high mortgage payment. Right? Now, am I prepared? Do I have a cash reserve? Sure. Right? Because I want to be prepared at all costs. But guess what? A lot of landlords are not in that position. So instead of furloughing, why not add it on the back end? The banks still make their money. They just get their money a little bit later. It's delayed. But the returns still, the pension funds are not bothered. Their money is still protected. Their life savings still protected. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.